You didn't stop complaining because the pain ended. You stopped because you realized no one could really hear you. And if that sentence just hit you in the chest, don't move. This message is not for everyone, but it is for the one who stayed quiet while breaking inside. There was a moment you wanted to speak, to explain, to ask Allah why this was taking so long, but you didn't. You swallowed the words. You wiped your face. You carried it alone. And that's the moment your name was mentioned. Most people will never understand what happens after you give up complaining. They think silence means weakness. They think patience means you lost hope. They're wrong. Silence is where Allah listens differently. If you're still here, it's because something inside you knows this video found you on purpose. Leaving now would mean missing the part where your suffering finally makes sense. Stay with me. There was a moment when you almost spoke up, when the weight in your chest felt too heavy to carry alone. You wanted to ask, why is this taking so long? You wanted to say, this isn't fair. But something inside you stopped you, so you swallowed the words, you wiped your face, and you chose silence over complaining. That silence didn't go unnoticed. Not by Allah. If this feels uncomfortably specific, if it feels like someone is describing your inner life a little too closely, just stay with me. You don't need to do anything else right now. Just listen. Because leaving early would mean missing the part where everything finally starts to make sense. There's a kind of patience no one applauds, a quiet patience. The kind where you still show up, still do what's required of you, still care deeply, even while feeling unseen. You didn't announce your struggle. You didn't turn it into a performance. You carried it alone, and you started to wonder if that made you weak. It didn't. It marked you. Before we go any deeper, let me gently say this. If this message is resonating with you, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Not because of algorithms, but because this space exists for people like you. This is deen and discipline, and everything here is about helping you understand what Allah is doing inside you during moments like this. You belong here. Now listen carefully. Most people complain early. They vent. They question. They demand answers. And there's nothing wrong with asking Allah for relief. But there is something rare about the one who stops complaining, not because the pain disappeared, but because they trusted Allah enough to stay quiet. That's where you are. You reached a point where you realized explaining yourself wasn't changing anything. Talking about it wasn't easing the ache. So you handed the noise over to Allah and kept your mouth closed, even though your heart was loud. And that's when your name was mentioned. Not in a way we can hear with our ears, but in a way that matters far more. There is a deep spiritual reality that very few people understand. Allah listens differently to the silent servant. When you stop narrating your pain to the world and start carrying it with dignity, something shifts. Your struggle becomes private, sacred, protected. You may have thought your silence meant you were being ignored. In truth, it meant you were being prepared. Let me slow this down, because this part matters. You didn't give up complaining because you stopped caring. You gave up complaining because you were tired of being misunderstood, tired of explaining, tired of watching people nod their heads but never truly see you. So you withdrew. You focused on surviving, on holding yourself together. That choice changed the entire nature of your test. Allah tests in layers, and most people get stuck early. They never move past the stage of constant questioning. They stay loud, they stay restless, but you moved into a quieter level, a level where the test is no longer about endurance but about trust. This is why things may have felt even more silent lately. No signs, no reassurance, no clear answers, just you and Allah. And that can feel terrifying if you don't understand what it means. Silence from Allah does not mean absence. It often means intimacy. There is a moment in every believer's life when Allah stops responding in obvious ways and starts working in hidden ones. This is not punishment. This is selection. This is what happens when you're no longer being shaped on the outside, but rebuilt on the inside. Think about how much you've changed recently, not in dramatic ways, in subtle ones. The way you react, the way you observe instead of respond, the way you feel pain without immediately trying to escape it. You didn't become numb. You became deeper. And yes, there were nights you felt forgotten, nights when you wondered if your patience was pointless, if staying quiet was a mistake, if maybe you should have spoken up more, demanded more, fought louder. But here's what you couldn't see then. Your restraint was being recorded. Every swallowed complaint, every tear you wiped away before anyone noticed, every moment you chose dignity over drama. None of it vanished into nothing. There is a special kind of divine attention that comes to those who stop asking, "Why me?" and start saying, "I trust you even when I don't understand." You may not feel chosen. You may feel delayed, paused, stuck, but being chosen rarely feels glamorous while it's happening. It feels lonely, confusing, heavy. And that's intentional. Because if everyone understood what Allah was doing with you right now, this path wouldn't remain protected. It would be crowded. And this path was never meant for everyone. You didn't lose your voice. You refined it. You didn't give up. You surrendered control. And surrender is where real transformation begins. Stay with me, because in the next part, I'm going to talk about why things often get quieter right before Allah changes something fundamental in your life. And once you understand that, the waiting won't feel so unbearable anymore. There comes a point in the waiting where something subtle happens, not outside of you, inside. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss it because it doesn't arrive with relief or excitement. It arrives with clarity. You start noticing that the same things that once triggered you don't have the same power anymore. The same silence that used to scare you now feels familiar. Heavy, yes, but not hostile, almost intentional. This is the shift most people never reach. Because when Allah accepts your patience, He begins to change the way you see your own struggle. You stop measuring your worth by outcomes. You stop counting how long it's been. You stop asking when and start asking who you're becoming. That doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means the pain no longer defines you. You might still wake up some mornings with a tight chest. Still feel that quiet ache when you see others moving ahead while you feel paused. Still have moments where you wonder if you misunderstood everything. That's normal. What's not normal is how you handle those moments now. Before they consumed you, now they pass through you. You don't spiral the way you used to. You don't beg the way you once did. You sit with the discomfort, acknowledge it, and let it move on. That's not emotional shutdown. That's emotional maturity born from faith. Allah didn't just teach you how to wait. He taught you how to remain dignified while waiting. And that dignity is not accidental. It's cultivated. You see, when you gave up complaining, you didn't just close your mouth. You opened a space inside yourself where Allah could work without interference, without noise, without impatience getting in the way. Complaining scatters the heart, silence gathers it. And a gathered heart is easier to shape. There is a reason you feel more aware lately, more reflective, more sensitive to meaning. You're not becoming weaker, you're becoming more perceptive. You're learning to listen beneath the surface of things. That's why random reminders hit harder now. A line in a conversation, a verse you've heard before suddenly feeling personal, a moment of calm that comes out of nowhere. Those aren't coincidences. Those are gentle confirmations meant only for you. Not to rush you, not to excite you, but to steady you. Because what Allah is preparing you for requires steadiness. It requires someone who won't panic under pressure, someone who won't fall apart when things don't go according to plan, someone who knows how to stay grounded when answers are delayed. That's why your training happened in silence. People assume being chosen feels empowering right away. It doesn't. At first, it feels isolating, because the process strips away distractions. It narrows your focus. It forces you to confront yourself without filters. You had to sit with your thoughts, your fears, your disappointments. You had to face the parts of you that wanted reassurance but learned to survive without it. And that's uncomfortable. But it's also rare. Not everyone is capable of holding themselves together without constant feedback. Not everyone can stay sincere when no one is watching. Not everyone can keep believing when the signs aren't obvious. You did. Even on days when belief felt thin, even when hope felt quiet, even when you were tired of being strong. And that's why the silence didn't break you. It refined you. If you're feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and calm right now, that's not random. It's the result of carrying something heavy for a long time and finally learning how to balance it properly. You're not waiting in vain. You're waiting in alignment. And alignment doesn't rush, it settles. In the next part, I want to gently talk about the loneliness that comes with this stage. Because being chosen often means being misunderstood. And if you've been feeling disconnected lately, there's a reason for that too. Stay here, you're exactly where you need to be. Loneliness at this stage doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't come with tears every night or obvious heartbreak. It's quieter than that. It's the feeling of being surrounded, yet not fully met, of being present but not fully understood. You might still laugh with people, still function, still show up, but there's a part of you that stays untouched by conversation, a part you don't bother explaining anymore because you already know most people wouldn't know what to do with it. That's not you becoming distant. That's you becoming selective. When Allah draws someone closer, He often thins out their emotional crowd, not because others are bad, but because not everyone is meant to walk with you into deeper spaces. Some people are only meant for earlier chapters. And that realization can hurt. Because you didn't leave anyone behind on purpose. You just changed, quietly, gradually, and suddenly the gap was there. You may have wondered why you feel lonelier now than when things were openly difficult. Why this phase, which looks calm on the outside, feels heavier on the inside. It's because you're no longer distracted by chaos. Silence reveals what noise used to hide. And in that silence, you start noticing how often you used to pour yourself out just to feel connected. How often you shrank your inner world so others could feel comfortable. How often you accepted partial understanding because full understanding felt like too much to ask for. You don't do that anymore. Not because you're closed off, but because you've learned the cost of being emotionally everywhere. Allah didn't take people away from you to punish you. He removed certain connections to teach you where your true anchoring needed to be. There's a reason your conversations feel shorter lately, why you don't overshare, why you listen more than you speak, why you protect your inner state. You're learning discernment. And discernment often looks like loneliness before it feels like peace. You might question yourself here, wonder if you're becoming too detached, too serious, too quiet. But notice this. Even in the loneliness, there is a strange steadiness, a sense that you're not falling apart. You're not desperate for company. You're simply alone in a different way. Not abandoned, just accompanied differently. Because when external understanding decreases, divine closeness increases. Allah becomes the one who hears what you don't say, the one who understands the layers beneath your calm exterior, the one who sits with you in moments you don't share with anyone else. And that companionship changes you. It makes you less reactive, less needy, less dependent on being validated. You start realizing that not every thought needs to be spoken, not every emotion needs to be witnessed. Some things are meant to stay between you and Allah. That realization is not isolating. It's grounding. You are not being pushed away from people. You are being pulled inward. And inward is where clarity lies. This is why, even when loneliness visits, it doesn't destroy you. It sits beside you, teaches you, then softens. Because you are no longer afraid of being alone with yourself. That fear had to dissolve before the next phase could begin. In the next part, I want to talk about the quiet strength that grows here. The kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, but changes everything once it's formed. The kind that prepares you for responsibility, not just relief. Stay with me. This is where things start to deepen. The strength that grows here doesn't feel powerful at first. It feels almost invisible, like nothing is happening, like you're just getting through the days without falling apart. But this kind of strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to prove anything. It shows up in how you pause before reacting, in how you breathe through moments that once overwhelmed you, in how you don't rush to explain yourself anymore. This strength is quiet because it's stable. You're no longer held together by urgency or fear. You're held together by acceptance. Not acceptance of the pain, but acceptance of Allah's wisdom within it. That's a big difference. Earlier in your journey, strength meant pushing harder, trying more, holding on tighter. But that version of strength was exhausting. It depended on control, and control always runs out. What you're learning now is endurance without force. You can sit with uncertainty and not collapse. You can face unanswered questions and still move forward. You can feel disappointment without letting it harden your heart. That's not something you learned overnight. It was built slowly, through every moment you wanted to complain and didn't, through every time you chose restraint over release, through every quiet night where you said nothing but still trusted Allah to hear you. This is why Allah trusted you with silence. Because silence requires strength most people don't have. Anyone can speak, anyone can react, anyone can vent, but it takes inner grounding to remain composed when your heart is heavy. It takes faith to believe that not everything needs to be said for it to be known. You may not realize this yet, but people will start feeling something different around you, not because you're trying to influence them, but because grounded people shift the emotional atmosphere without effort. Your presence will feel calmer, your words will feel measured, your energy will feel steady. That's not charisma. That's alignment. And alignment always carries weight. Allah is preparing you for responsibility, not just relief, for carrying something meaningful, not just receiving comfort, because comfort alone doesn't change lives, but grounded people do. You're being shaped into someone who can hold space for others without losing themselves, someone who can listen without absorbing everything, someone who can care deeply without becoming emotionally scattered. That's why your heart had to be gathered first. If you feel tired lately, not just physically but emotionally, that's understandable. Growth takes energy, even quiet growth, especially quiet growth. But notice this too. You're tired in a cleaner way now, not frantic, not panicked, just spent. That's the exhaustion of someone who's been lifting something real. And you didn't drop it. In the next part, I want to speak directly to the moments when doubt creeps back in. The moments when you wonder if all this waiting, all this silence, actually means anything at all. Because those moments still come, even now, and they don't mean you're failing. Stay with me, this part matters more than you think. Doubt still visits, even now, even after everything you've grown through, and when it comes, it doesn't announce itself as disbelief. It comes quietly, disguised as a question, a tired thought, a late-night whisper that asks, what if all of this means nothing? If that question has crossed your mind, it doesn't cancel your faith. It confirms your humanity. Because faith was never meant to remove questions. It was meant to teach you how to carry them without breaking. There will be moments when the waiting feels heavier again. Moments when you look back and wonder if you stayed quiet for too long, if patience cost you opportunities, if silence delayed things that might have moved faster if you had pushed harder. That's when you need to remember this. Allah does not build lives randomly. Nothing about your timing is accidental. Nothing about your delays is careless. Nothing about your silence was wasted. What you couldn't see while waiting was the protection in the pause, the shielding in the delay, the mercy in being held back from things you weren't meant to carry yet. You weren't ignored. You were being spared. And doubt often appears right before understanding settles in, right before the heart fully accepts what the mind is still catching up to. That's why these thoughts show up now, not because you're regressing, but because you're nearing emotional closure. You're reaching the point where you no longer need constant reassurance to continue, where belief doesn't depend on outcomes, where trust exists even without visible proof. That's a sacred place to stand. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll notice something important. Even on days when doubt speaks, you don't walk away. You don't shut down. You don't abandon Allah. You stay. You listen. You keep going. That consistency matters more than perfect certainty. Allah doesn't expect you to feel strong every day. He only asks that you return, again and again, with whatever you have, even if it's quiet, even if it's tired, even if it's unsure. And you've been returning. That's why this chapter is coming to a close. Not with fireworks, not with instant relief, but with grounding, with a sense of inner steadiness that doesn't depend on what happens next. You're learning how to stand without rushing the future. And that's when the heart finally rests. If this message feels like it put words to something you've been carrying silently, I'd love to hear from you. Take a moment and leave a comment, not something polished, just something honest. What part of your life required the most patience? And if you know someone who's been quiet lately, someone who's holding more than they say, share this with them. Sometimes a message like this arrives exactly when it's needed most. If you haven't already, stay connected by subscribing to Deen and Discipline. These conversations are ongoing, and the next video will speak about what happens when patience turns into purpose, and how to recognize when Allah begins opening doors quietly, without noise or announcement. Until then, be gentle with yourself. You didn't lose your voice. You learned when silence was stronger.